When it comes to acceptance of same-sex relationships, there's been a huge change in recent decades. 30 years ago, only 11% thought they were not wrong at all. Most people thought they were wrong. Now, the vast bulk of us think they're not wrong at all. While approval is much higher in the younger age groups, all ages are more tolerant than they used to be. And in fact, most Christians in this country now think there's nothing wrong with same-sex relationships too. There's less long-term data on attitudes to trans issues. In the latest British Attitude Survey, respondents were asked whether suitably qualified people who are trans should be employed as police officers or primary school teachers. About 4 out of 10 of us said definitely yes to that. And a YouGov poll for PinkNews was published today on the fraught issue of whether a doctor's approval should be required in order to change your legal gender. 58% of the public thought a doctor's sign-off should be required. Look, let's have a little think about public opinion. Clearly the change on sexuality has been very dramatic. When it comes to gender and transgender issues, not so much. I'm joined by Benjamin Cohen, the founder of PinkNews, responsible for the YouGov poll we quoted there. Very good evening to you. Would you say we have reached broad acceptance of same-sex relationships?
Pretty much so. So also in the polling for YouGov today that we commissioned, we saw that most people are happy with gay couples having children. Most people are happy with gay issues being taught in schools. They also quite overwhelmingly want same-sex marriage to be introduced in Northern Ireland. So they're pretty OK with that. But as you said, most people are not OK with the plans the government has on gender reassignment.
Right. Well, but let's stick on the same-sex at the moment. It was interesting that their survey, and I don't think you can read much into it, because it was self-selecting. But it was interesting that 2/3 of the people they surveyed said they were uncomfortable holding hands in public.
Yeah, I find that with my husband. So, and I live in London, but there's a street right by the house that we never like to hold hands on. Nothing's happened there, but there's a perception that we have that something might happen there. Might be about the people there, might be our own prejudices, but sometimes you just don't feel comfortable. And
so it's not, because you've just sat and described how broad the acceptance is,
yeah,
and then just given a cast-iron example of how you don't quite believe it yourself that you can walk down a street.
We just came from Downing Street, where the Prime Minister had a reception, and we did a big kiss on the doorstep of Number 10, like we like to do, and we've gone to these events, but I wouldn't necessarily do that everywhere.
OK, right. OK, the trans issues. How would you describe where the public is at the moment on gender and the kind of more flexible attitudes about people assigning their own?
I think that the public's probably confused. The Prime Minister came to the Pink News Awards last year in October and said she supported changing the law to allow people to self-identify for their legal documents. It's not really for anything else, it's just for changing paperwork. But then, and said there'll be a consultation. It's open today, nearly a year on. And during that time, there's been a campaign of misinformation by those opposed to transgender rights. So I think the public is reasonably confused, but also, let's be clear, trans people have been able to self-identify for years. This is merely about the paperwork, i.e. changing their birth certificates or replacing that with a gender recognition certificate.
But, so you found quite a high level of scepticism. How about among gay men and lesbian women?
Well, unfortunately, with the YouGov polling, we couldn't do that because it's too small a group. But I think that within gay men, there has been a shift more recently, which is broadly in favour of trans rights. We are seeing this at Pink News within the lesbian community, that there is more scepticism. So every time on Pink News we do a story about trans issues, they say, what about lesbians? Half my team nearly, I think, are lesbian now.
Well, what's really the really interesting question is the kind of mental model one might have had is that, oh, trans, 20 years behind gay, and that when kind of, you know, people will progress along a curve and same-sex was the last one, trans will be the next one, and so on and so on. Or do you think maybe gender is a kind of more fundamental thing and people will be more deeply resistant to that?
It's much more complex. But also, if you think about our own personal relationships, so most people in the UK now probably know someone that's gay. They might have someone in their family, they might have a friend, it might be a work colleague or a neighbour, but I would say that probably most people don't know a trans person, or if they do know a trans person, they might not know they're trans.
Yeah.
So actually it's about knowing people. So we think about that survey that we did for Pink News, actually, if people probably answering that gay question on the people that they knew. but they were answering the trans question on this
On
mythical
abstract,
person
on an abstract,
that's
yeah.
been in the Daily Mail, supposedly, and other newspapers going into women's changing rooms and things, which is not happening, by the way.
Benjamin, thank you very much indeed.
Thank you.
Thank you.